Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Turn Left. I am your host, Indiana's own Dana Black, coming to you live. Yes, well, no, not live from the studio. This is actually a recorded podcast because I wanted to have this conversation with the amazing Mary Noone, because here's what happens. We ask people to run for office. We say, hey, we need more Democrats to run for office, but we often don't offer up the tools, right, to help them be successful. And so this conversation, this podcast is with a good friend of mine who does nothing but strategize for candidates. Let me read her bio for you. This is my girl, Mary Noone. Business and social entrepreneur specializing in utilizing business frameworks in the campaign space with a keen focus on creating a value-based branding strategy for candidates while leaning into traditional and advanced marketing strategies to elevate a candidate's platform. 20 years of experience in branding activation, influencer marketing, leadership development, and data analysis. Co-founder and lead strategist of Hoosier Victory Alliance, a nonprofit dedicated to helping pro-democracy candidates and organizations in Indiana take back power from the extreme right-wing Republican supermajority. HVA has built a new playbook to change the electoral landscape in Indiana and other heavily gerrymandered states to support candidates for state and local offices. Co-creator of Freedom Over Fascism podcast, they investigate what it takes to build power and freedom in Indiana and across mega captured America. Stephanie Wilson hosts and produces the show and interviews authors, experts, candidates, historians, and strategists to discuss how freedom can defeat fascism. See, Turn Left ain't the only one out here. There are other people who are talking about this stuff, guys, but I'm going to use my platform to elevate those voices. Mary, thank you for taking time to come and talk to us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to have this conversation. You and I synced on this and we said, we got to voice this a little bit loud. We need to amplify this.
Absolutely. And I think you are the perfect person to explain this because you are strategizing all the time. Before we get started, how often do you get a new candidate who is looking to use your services and they have absolutely no clue what to do?
120%. So I think what we have to switch the mindset is we need candidates to be candidates. They expertise in their community. They know what their community needs. They're an expertise in education. They're an expert in the medical field. They're an expert in the service that their community needs. They have an eye and a pulse on that. What we put on them is the additional expectation that they know how to run for office. It is a different beast. So we're asking them to live in two lanes and to go full throttle, hold down a job, run for office, and also pick up this new skill set that is pretty a lot to do. And by doing that, we're actually preventing them from being successful because we're not giving them the tools. So that's what we're here to do, is to say, hey, this is you. Go be a candidate.
Right.
Get to know your community. Listen, do all those town halls, do everything. But no, you do not know how to run social media. How do you do the voter file? What's that? What's Van? I have to do a website. How does that go? Oh, pixels. What are pixels? I have to do Facebook. I've had candidates when we're on calls and it's, for example, it's close to election time. You have to get authorized to do political ads in Facebook. That goes over some candidates' heads and it's too late. So we want to kind of say, hey, you go be a candidate. Let's help on the back end for you.
I love it. And I love that you are taking on that role and you understand how those pieces work. So Mary, the next question I have then is, how do you come in and play a role in helping them understand the things that they don't?
That's a really good question because one of the things that start first is voters vote for something and they need to know who you are to get engaged with you and know what you stand for. That goes back to branding. So let's take a minute to understand that. The best example that I can give is in the branding world, right? People buy something because they know it. They know its value. They know what it stands for. And they don't care what it costs. They will stand by it. Let's talk about high-end loyalty brands like Hermes. Okay, it's the most iconic one, right? It doesn't cost them that much to make that product, but people will stand by it because they know what it represents. And I challenge us to say, have we set candidates up for success so we know what candidates stand for, what the Democrats stand for, so voters can get behind them. And that's a big lift. That's perception, that's value add, that's marketing. So how are we going to help candidates get over that hurdle? So when people go into that voting opportunity in the booth, they know exactly what they're voting for. And because so much is at stake right now that
Hmm.
people are actually pulling back. One of the surveys we did last year in 2023 was it is so volatile out there that when voters go in the booth and they don't know what they're voting for, they're actually choosing to leave more blank than actually check the box.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's scary, especially in Indiana, where we assume that Indiana is this really red state. You provided some information to me that I was able to look through. And honestly, it's not that red. Talk
No.
about the misconception that folks have out here about Indiana being this super red state.
Okay, I'm going to read something to you because the media is playing right into this. And this really gets at me because Indiana, I will say this 10 times over, we are a rig state. We are not a red state. Do we have red leaning tendencies? Possibly, yes, that is there. You can't deny it. But we are more rigged than red. What I mean by that is the media. If the media plays into this argument, people buy into it and it gets harder to go over that hurdle. So, for example, you've got James Briggs out there. The problem for Democrats is that Republicans have a base too. It is
Mhm.
much larger than theirs. I challenge that. Democrats need to win voters beyond its base. We're going to talk about that, which means they have to appeal to the right, not necessarily, if ever to hopes to win another statewide election. We have to stop calling Indiana a red state because
Okay.
what happens is people stop showing up. What do I mean by that? Is we are rigged from gerrymandering. And for us to kind of step back and get over the hurdle, we have to understand where that came from. Okay. I'm not sure if the listeners have ever heard of Karl Rove. Karl Rove,
Oh,
there you go.
mm.
Ding, ding. Very active in the Bush administrations. He's a strategist for the GOP. And what he put in, he was not hiding it. And in the Wall Street Journal, he even put his plan out there. It was called Red Map. And lo and behold, Indiana was a targeted state.
Hmm.
Okay, what do I mean by that? They had a plan to take over state houses by the census in 2010. House District 5, Heidi Bidinger's seat, was actually one of those targeted seats because it was a close race. So what they did was they calculated what state houses they could pick off, go into the 2010 redistricting, and start doing the maps in their favor.
Hmm.
Okay, that was a plan to the point where fast forward in 2020, down in North Carolina, a young woman estranged from her dad. Her dad passes away. She's going through his materials. We don't use floppy disks anymore. It's 2020. Who does?
Honey.
But yep, nobody does. But let me think of his name. He was Thomas Hoffer,
Okay.
Hoffeller, Hoffeller. What he was doing was he was a hire of Karl Rove's and he was keeping all his work on a floppy disk because he said, I don't want any of this going over emails. What it was strategizing across the country on what state houses they could capture.
Wow.
It's so planned that those discs, that young woman who found it in her father's filings after he passed away, handed it over to Common Cause, and that evidence was used in North Carolina's fighting for their redistricting.
Wow.
Yep. So here we are in Indiana. So I challenge that we are not red, we are rigged.
And it's going to take some time to like change people's mindset on that because most people don't. They just like the high level sound bite.
Right.
People don't want to dig in. I literally had a Twitter debate with someone who plopped up a map and said, "How can Indiana win by just turning out the base?" And had all these red counties and just a few blue dots. And I'm like, the blue dots are where the people are. The red
Right.
dots are where the cows and chickens are. The cows and chickens ain't voting, right? So why is this? Explain to the people so they can understand why it's so important to energize and turn out the base. Yes, we want to make sure that we're serving rural communities. We're not saying that we're trying to ignore rural communities, but why is it so important that we turn out and energize these blue areas that actually have people?
Okay. So important because the data proves this out. So let's take one more step back because in 2020, everybody says that, going back to your rural question, 1/3 of Indiana folks, Hoosiers live in rural areas. Okay.
1/3? Is that
One
it?
third. Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about the top 10 in 2020, the counties that had the lowest voter turnout, that they're trickling down because they feel defeated. That is Marion County.
Ooh,
That is Lake County. Number three is St. Joseph. Elkhart. You see where I'm going with this. Add all the top 10 lower turnout counties, it adds up close to 1 million voters.
wow.
Okay. And in 2022, let's just look at St. Joseph County. They dropped by another 11%. So
Wow.
ask yourself the $20 million question. Why are people not showing up? And then when you dive again, the data doesn't lie. When you look at St. Joseph County, let's just take that for an example. In 2022, in our Democratic pool of voters, the Republicans had a dip, about 893 voters didn't turn out. Okay. And the Democrats, it was close to 20,000 voters did not show out in 2022 that are Democrats. So you have to ask yourself, again, the business framework, SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunity, what's your threat? What is going on there?
Mm-hmm.
And we are not giving voters a reason to vote, because the number
Mm.
one thing a voter does do is vote for something and not against something.
Right, right.
Okay, you have to be asked. So how do you goes back to your question about what's going on here is we're not engaging the base. If you lose the base, aka the numbers I just went through, the voters will not turn out because you cannot get to your persuadables unless you engage your base.
And that is such a key point. And I know we're at a pivotal time, and I'm not bringing this discussion up to disparage anybody at this moment, right? We see who our gubernatorial candidate is. She's a former Republican superintendent of schools. She is now running as a Democrat. That is Jennifer McCormick, and she has picked Terry Gooden
Mhm.
on the hopes that he can turn out the rural vote. But you just said most of rural Hoosiers, it's only a third of total Hoosiers, and the
Correct.
other 2/3 are not going to be moved by a Terry Gooden pick. I'm not saying that he's good,
Right.
bad, or indifferent. I'm not going down that track, but I am questioning the philosophy. Are we as Democrats shooting ourselves in the foot when we say, "Oh, we want to go get rural voters," and then we don't do the things necessary to engage the other 2/3 of Indiana?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So there's a misconception that if you want to win in Indiana, and I will stand by this, that in order for you to win, you have to go down the middle. Okay. But think of that. Think of it as a pyramid. If you don't engage your base, they won't get the persuadables. There's a way to get the middle. But what we know from 2022 is candidates that straddled the middle lost.
Wow.
Candidates that straddled the middle lost in 22 against MAGA candidates. We've got MAGA written all over Indiana. We've got Braun and Micah Beckwith. We couldn't have a more perfect contrast. So
Right.
to answer your question, what wins is when voters feel threatened against that contrast. Our freedoms are being taken away. So to answer your question about McCormick and Goodwin as a candidate combination, I don't know Goodwin. I haven't had a
Gooden.
chance.
His name is Terry Gooden. I want to make sure we say
Good.
it right.
Thank you.
Gooden. Yeah.
Good. I don't know him, but I will have to say that if let's look at Ryan Bussey, for example. Have you been following him? He's running for governor in Montana.
No,
They
no, I haven't. Tell us
they
some.
wrote an amazing piece about him in the New York Times.
Okay.
And he is holding strong. He is a former executive for a gun company, Kimberly, excuse me. And he's running on the Democratic ticket, and he's coming out loud and strong of what he stands for. And he's challenging the GOP. And it's very clear of what to vote for. That same New York Times article actually pointed out Jennifer McCormick as a centrist and said, hey, I'm not sure if this is going to move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the energy over here because psychological things have to be in play. What do I mean by that? Voting is a psychological behavior. People vote on emotions and they vote for something, right? They don't vote against something. So when they vote on emotions, they vote on likability.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, we've really upset the base by
Okay.
putting the candidates that we've put forward in Gooden. He has made some statements about being against marriage and equality and reproductive rights. Now, everybody can grow and learn and evolve. But my question is, Your candidate you chose was again down the middle.
Mm-hmm. So you
And
have two candidates down the middle. Who's in?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And we're not saying, and again, I want the listeners to
Right.
understand we are not disparaging either of those candidates. We're talking about their ideology and where they sit in the political spectrum so that
Right.
you can understand what it takes to engage the base. And it's not that these are not great candidates or good
Right.
candidates. It's just that they are not going to energize the base. I want to make sure that we are very clear on that, right?
Right.
Because people will hear this and be like, Dana dogging out the candidates.
No.
No, we are not even really talking about the candidates. We're talking about how to engage the voter,
Right.
right? Right.
Right.
Okay. I'm sorry. I wanted to just get
This
that
is
in
really,
there.
it's a really good point. Really good point because voting is all about habits and getting connected and being relatable. And we need the top of the ticket to answer that to a vast majority of people. And so when people say, well, we've got to go down the middle, we've got to get the persuadables, what you want to do is engage your base first and then get your persuadables. And there's a skill set to that because right now our voters are really despair. They're doom scrolling. They
Mm-hmm.
don't haven't given them a reason to vote. So in the messaging world where I come from, what you want to do is do all your messaging based on three elements. Start every conversations with values. Because if you connect on values, you can bring those persuadables over and you haven't lost your base.
Okay.
Okay. So what you do is you talk about your values. What do we all agree on? Then you call out the villain. That's the GOP. We've got a lot of villains in Indiana, so we can really do that easily. And then you talk about the future. What are you going to offer that's better for voters? Because they want to look forward. They do not want to look backwards. So let's take our good old a chucklehead. I call him a chucklehead, Jim Banks, right?
Yeah.
So this is where you talk about how do I get the mill over, persuadables. You and I, we're all agreeing on the same page. We all agree that if you put money in a bank account, you should be able to get it back. But Jim Banks thinks Social Security and Medicare should be cut, and that's not your money, right?
Right.
The value is we all can agree on when you put money in a bank account, it is yours. But the villain, Jim Banks, wants to take all your Social Security and cut Social Security and Medicare. And then you can say the candidate, let's just say Dr. Valerie McRae, for example, will fight so you can retire in dignity because that's your money.
Okay.
Because what happens is when you start talking about a collective that we can all agree on, that's when you bring this persuadables over and you didn't lose your base.
Right. Right. So this may be jumping ahead, but I want to get back to this again, because we're not disparaging candidates. If you were a consultant on
Yes.
the McCormick Gooden campaign, seeing the discourse that has
Yep.
happened and how people are not necessarily the base is not happy with this choice, what advice would you give them that they could execute that would help them bring back the base to help get the base energized, or can they?
You know, it depends. So, as you all know, in Indiana, the lieutenant governor is chosen by a delegate convention. So, it's not a vote on the ballot in a primary. So, it's up to the delegates. So, the $20 million question is what do we want as Hoosiers in Indiana? Do we want two of kind of the same candidates, or do we want somebody else? Now, we've all heard the conversation whether JD Ford is going to run it, put his name on the ballot. I've also heard conversation that Keith Potts thought about doing that.
I also heard about a young man, and his name is Cliff here in Marion County. He's very, very progressive. He's thinking about putting his name up there. So it looks like it could be a contested race. But what if, the delegates coalesce, right? Delegates coalesce and we say, this is our ticket, right? What can we do? What can they do as a ticket to energize their base?
Yeah. So you're talking McCormick Gooden ticket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, if that's what the voters want and the delegate and the conventions decide that, great. What they need to do is they need to make sure the base understands what they're going to offer. So the top issues that really matter to folks around the country is democracy is on threat. It's on fire. That
yeah.
is in all the polling and focus groups, that is coming up hard. The economy. They need to be talking about the economy, but how does it impact me? Like what is happening in our state of Indiana that's actually causing folks to get discouraged about voting. And what it is they feel helpless. So as soon as people are grumpy and feel helpless, they stop voting. So that is the message that needs to come out from them. On top of that is they have to draw a clear contrast. They have to show the threat of the MAGA agenda. If they are unable or do not want to walk into that water, voters won't know what they're voting for. And by default, voters end up keeping what's the status quo, and who's in office, they keep the status quo. So it is the job of the candidate to get over that despair by drawing the clear contrast of what I have to offer, what they have done to you, and the vision that I'm going to bring you forward into the future.
Okay, I like that advice, and it sounds like that's the kind of advice a lot of our down ballot candidates could consume. So
Yes.
when you're talking, obviously the governor's race is the big race, and the United States Senate race is a big race. But when we're talking like Heidi, who I am crazy about, right? She's running for a House seat, and some of our down ballot, some of our county candidates, county council candidates, county recorder candidates, things of that nature.
Yep.
This philosophy will also work for them. This is not just a big top of the ticket type of
Right.
perspective, right?
Exactly. It works up and down the ballot because the other thing we have to really think about as Heidi and myself, after the 2022 election, we headed to DC. We're like, okay, we lost a lot of us here, but what can we learn? Where can we go? We went to the New Deal conference down in DC. It's where Pete Buttigieg, started making his national way. And so we went there to learn more. And what did we discover? We discovered from talking to other candidates, folks like Tim Ryan was there, Jocelyn Benson, Andre Fortes from Arizona, the big, huge delegation from the State House in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania when they flipped. What were
Okay.
the high level takeaways? So let's look at Ohio, for example. Tim Ryan didn't win in Pennsylvania. John Fetterman won on the Senate side. Shapiro won in governor,
Hmm.
and then they flipped their state house.
Hmm.
Step back and ask yourself why. What did they do differently that Ohio didn't do? Number one thing, they wrapped themselves around the number one message that voters can understand: freedom. When you take away my freedom, I don't like that. So they wrapped themselves around that message up and down the ballot. But what they did was, so in order to do that, was they got everybody on board with how to message on freedom collectively. Because
Mm.
when you're, what happens in with Democrats, let's go to branding. You know what Hermes is, everybody's on board, it's
Hmm.
iconic, you got it. When we talk about the GOP, Republicans, people know what they stand for. When you talk to Democrats, every Democrat every year rebrands themselves a little differently from the other one, a little differently from this one. So voters don't have a sense of what Democrats stand for.
Right.
In Pennsylvania, they said, we're all going to come together on this one value. You can identify, you can create your own brand within that. And in order to, what happened was they were successful because when they are singing from the same songbook, the message penetrates.
Okay.
So if you're not singing from the same lyrics, what happens is people don't know what people stand for and they default to what they already know and
Right.
who's in
Right.
office. Fast forward, here we are in 2024. Frintrice Driscoll down in Florida. She is the House Minority Leader. Everybody in the House in Florida, they have every seat contested. Everybody, they have Democrat in every seat of the bus. That's the other thing that has to happen. And secondly, all the folks, the Democrats in Florida, are running on freedom, freedom to be safe, prosperous, and healthy. So now the candidates can figure out what that looks like in each one of their districts. Let's take prosperity.
Ah.
Okay, what kind of jobs? Is it union jobs? Is it the teachers need more help with their funding, whatever that looks like. Healthy. If you're in a district that you need to decide how to talk about reproductive rights, then you can figure out what that looks like for your districts. When you say healthy, I know in the state of Indiana, Boone County is really concerned about their water supply. So you
Hmm.
can parlay that into a lot of different categories. But because you're all putting your messaging out there about freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe, it penetrates. And then people know what Democrats stand for.
I love this message because I have told people all of the time, we're not the Republican Party. We're not going to all say the same dumb line over and
Right.
over again because you have to meet people where they are, right?
Correct.
And I mean that wholeheartedly. I know that there are places in Indiana where if I walk in the room, the message is going to be lost, right? It
Right.
just is, right? So what you do is you get an older white dude right? Who is a Democrat, but he's saying the same thing in Switzerland County that we're saying in Marion County, but making it and tailoring it to fit the audience. I
Correct.
love that analogy. A lot of people think that we're supposed to just run around and say the same thing. No, you cannot say in the Black community on 38th and
Right.
Post Road the same thing that you're saying in Carmel up on
Mhm.
Gray Road or what you're saying up in Mishawaka. It's just not going to work.
Correct.
And it's up to the candidate to take that message. So from on high, the party says these are the things, and then the candidate says, okay, these are the things that we're going to talk about, and I tailor it to
Correct.
my community. I freaking love that message.
Right. Because
I'm
you think about it. Number one thing Mike always talks about, our party chair, Mike Shields, earned media. So if the media picks up on it, then they're all singing from the same songbook. Oh, this is what the Democrats stand for. Oh, this is what's happening in this county. It becomes an organic snowball effect because that's how candidates get elected. Number one, go back to the marketing, go back. It's a funnel. It's awareness first. People have to be aware who you are and what you stand for. The best analogy I can think of is that's why social media is so important in the communications world right now
right.
in candidates. So think about it. It's fall. The leaves are changing. You're getting constant advertisement from Home Depot and Lowe's and got to get your yard ready, right? And all of a sudden you're out there and your leaf blower breaks. Well, you're like, oh yeah, I did see an advertisement about Home Depot having a discount. You go and you look it up because you want to get educated. And then you make a choice. And after you make a choice, you're like, oh, wow, you go back online, you talk to your friends how much you loved it. There's the loyalty piece. So we have to create that kind of opportunity for our voters to come on board. And the only way you do that is they get aware of what we're offering.
I love that. And would you also suggest to your candidates to think about, when they want to run and what they do leading up to before they even put their name on the ballot? Like one of the
Oh,
things I always talk about is be in the community. My
yes,
God, do
yes,
something first. What kind of advice do you give when, because I know people come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about running for mayor in 4 years, right? Or 3 years. What
right.
advice do you give those candidates?
Two things. And it's funny because one of my Stephanie, who we do the podcast with, her brother is a communications person around the country in DC. He worked for the former Senator Feinstein, who since we know has passed away. And when we sat down with him, Heidi and I sat down with him in DC, again, picking all people's brains, learning. And we already knew this, and he just kind of put a stamp on it. Number one is a candidate, if you're thinking of running for office, you need to be involved in a project in your community. Voters need proof positive that you are going to be there for them. You're going to listen, you're going to learn. So what can you point back to that you've already accomplished so people start believing in you? I hear it from candidates all the time when they go to ask for money because this parlays to make donation call time easier because you're the candidate. And when you call a donor, they are investing in you and also their vision. You're the conduit. So if you can say, hey, I was successful here, like Heidi, I'm going to use her as an example. She's known around the state for lead poisoning and for working in the communities to eradicate lead. So she's been on state panels, she's worked with other folks, so she can talk about that success. So she's a track record. So when people are giving you your money, they need to know what you're capable of.
Right.
So now you can tell your story. And that's the second thing. You have to be able to tell your story. And so you've got the proof positive, you can tell your story. And secondly, embedded with that telling the story is when you run for office, if you're not out there on social media in a public way and all of a sudden you want to run and you're starting it now, you're drinking from the fire hose. People
Right.
don't know who you are. So if you think you want to run for office, you need a public visibility before you pull the trigger to run for office. So it's really hard to get that brand awareness, bring folks down the funnel if they don't know who you are. It goes back to money. How can I invest in you if I don't know who you are?
And I find that interesting because when I ran for office in 2016, I knew none of that, right? I just knew that Riffer pissed me off and Brian Bosma had everything to do with it, right? I wasn't a legacy. I didn't have name recognition. And you mentioned that social media piece.
Yep.
I was able to use social media in a way to create that
Yep.
community awareness when I wasn't someone. Had I known then what I know now, I would have done so much more before I ran. I wouldn't have ran until 2018 or
Mm-hmm.
2020, but it was so infuriating that he didn't when I voted in 2014 that there wasn't anyone for me to vote for. I literally was like, this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
But talk about so even if you don't have that name recognition, there's still a way for you to do it. Another way to do it is do candidate training, right? I don't think candidates understand that they call
Mm.
it political science
Right,
for a reason,
right.
right? Talk about the importance of, if you know you're going to run and you're going to run in a couple of years, talk about the importance of doing some candidate training.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. So one of my trainings that I'm actually rolling out in January, it's like a master class.
Oh,
And the reason why I call it the master class is because when you look at it, it's 12 weeks, right? And it's so when we talk about candidates running for office, they jump to launching. And in my coursework here, it's actually, I think, embedded in week 8 or 7. That's how much more prep work you have to be aware of before you even think of running for office. So candidate training is really important because the number one thing that challenges candidates is raising for money. So if
mm-hmm.
you've got that awareness of people know who you are, that ask gets a lot easier. You have to learn what tools are out there at your disposal to make your life easier. And then the other thing is you need to know who you can lean on. And when you're in candidate training, what ends up happening is you build your relationships within the ecosystem. So that is really, really important too. And also, what I always point out with the candidate training, what becomes candidates become more aware that in order for you to run for office, it's going to take a lot of folks.
Oh God, yes.
Going to take a lot of folks, and you can't rely on just one or two of your best friends. Okay. You're going to need a lot of volunteers. So you need to get in relationship with those folks that you're going to make a big ask to. So you need to have that time and bandwidth to kind of start building those community relationships. You made a very good point. You're going to relate to a certain community. I'm going to relate to a certain community. And I need folks that I can rely on to say, will you get me an invite over there so I can meet those people and we can talk together so you can build that relationship? Because again, the number one reason people vote is because you ask them. But
Mm-hmm.
so it really helps if you build your own personal network, your own relationships, so then it can kind of build into your campaign apparatus. And that doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit down and say, hey, you want to work in my campaign?
Right. The
It doesn't
things I
happen.
didn't know, like yeah, I went to like three different candidate trainings, two free and one paid, and I
Right,
still didn't understand that piece of it until I was on I wish I raised a decent amount of money, but if I had had 15 more volunteers, I would
right.
have just, oh my God. I mean, somebody to knock doors to get people to give up their time is an investment in the campaign, in the community. I wish I had more volunteers when I ran.
Yeah. And I'll share a story. So, one of the candidates that we're working with, and so the other thing that's really important is knowing that this is in the beginning of a campaign cycle. It is, remember, 8% of the general population pay attention. We're in that 8%, we're locked in. We really think everybody else thinks like us. Not so
No.
much. They don't start paying attention until September, October, November, right? So it's almost like a slow walk, and then all of a sudden you ramp up.
Hmm.
So what people think is this slow walk is not worth their time. It sure is, because if you're doing all this prep work, when you hit the climb in September, you have
Hmm.
everything in place to be successful. Instead of constantly like, ebbs and tides and rolling over these opportunities and just not being organized. You have to build your infrastructure, and that takes relationship building in your community, and that takes time.
I love it. We briefly touched on fundraising, but I want to go back to it because I work at Act Blue. Like that's my daytime gig, and I couldn't be happier working there. And I literally beg candidates to reach out to me so that I can teach you how to use our tools, right, to
Mhm.
help you with your digital fundraising. And
Yes.
I get crickets. Like I probably have in my two states, I probably, and this is not just Indiana, I have Indiana and Ohio. In
Yep.
my two states, I probably have over 800 accounts that I manage,
Yeah.
and I probably hear from 2%. And that's
Wow.
including county parties, that's including the candidates themselves, consultants. I literally beg candidates to, hey, let's spend a half an hour so I can show you how to use these tools. Why are we having such a hard time getting our candidates to take advantage of these services that are, in my case, ActBlue is offering this up. It's a service that we provide. What have you seen or heard or a reason why we are not able to get these parties and these candidates to take advantage of these training opportunities?
Good question. And I would answer that with their lack of understanding of where the dollars come in a campaign. In other words, 40 to 50% of your dollars in a campaign come from call time, calling people. The other, I would say 15 to 20% comes from digital, email, ActBlue as another tool. And then the other percentage, like 5 to 10% is house parties. We've got it reversed. People think that if you just go to house parties and you have a group of people together, they're going to give you money. Again, it's back to relationship building. It's that touch, it's that email, it's that visibility, it's that awareness. So the key thing is, and I go back to that funnel analogy. So with your tools, with ActBlue and other tools out there to work the visibility piece and the awareness piece, you have to have that in the equation because when you do make that call time call, like, oh yeah, I saw that. Oh yeah. And everybody forgets you need to have 3 touch points before anybody takes action. So the
Okay.
digital piece is very important. So when the time comes to make that phone call, they've already received 2 emails from you. They've already seen your digital outreach. And now you're making the call, like, there's number 3. Oh, yeah, I learned about you. I'm going to
Right.
say yes. So there's no one magic bullet. It has to be layered in there. So that is a very important, good question because that is part of the equation. We forget that this is a layering kind of thing in terms of getting people to get to yes for the donations.
Absolutely. Now, as a consultant, I'll be honest with you. I have seen consultants try to charge. You obviously should be paid for your services. I'm not saying that you should not, but I have seen where some consultants are like charging astronomical amount of money, astronomical amount of money for a down ballot candidate. And I have to talk to the candidate and say, can you really afford to pay $3,000 a month for this consultant? That might not be the right consultant for them. How do our down ballot candidates who don't have a lot of money and your expertise is invaluable. I'm not obviously I'm not saying that you give your services away for free because you shouldn't, right? You're worth your value. But how do we get our down ballot candidates to get this information from an expert like this where they're not paying $2,000 and $3,000 a month? How do they get these resources?
Really good question. It's funny because I've been talking to other consultants in the our ecosystem, and we're working to coming up with a membership model where it's like it's almost like as we come together as a collective. So there's two truths here. Candidates don't raise a lot of money in the state of Indiana. I've seen all the numbers. I know how its spectrum works. That's why we have a lot of uncontested seats because candidates are nervous about running and raising money in a very heavily rural red area.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do we solve that? But then again, there's folks on our side of the equation that they actually do need to get paid. So what we're doing and what we're offering is we're moving towards a membership model where for smaller dollars, because if you put candidates together, we can service more candidates in a collective and you don't get as much one-off, but you still get the weekly touch points on all the different expertise. And then if you feel you need a little bit more for this week, you can do that. So
Love it.
it's moving into it. So think of it like campaign expertise in a toolbox, in a kit, but you're getting personal expertise. And the other thing I would really stress is if you're going to run for office, where your investment really should be is in the candidate training and a very robust. That's where your big investment comes from. So then when you do run for office, you have a better understanding of what you need as a candidate because you might have a strength in organizing and relationship building. But my weakness is fundraising. I just need help in
Yeah,
that bucket.
yeah.
So you can understand who you are as a candidate and the leader to get your volunteers. You might need the whole breadth and depth of a package. So you have to invest in it. When you look at folks who are successful in areas around the country, you look at all the great speakers. They've been trained to speak that way. They invested in themselves. And women have a tendency not to invest in themselves. We need to have more women candidates running for office and saying yes to themselves and investing in themselves and showing up because we know they can do it.
Absolutely. When women run, we win. We just got to get them on the ballot and willing to, because again, mediocre dudes have been doing it for a long time. Like
Mhm.
some, but women, we think we have to be perfect in order
Yep.
to run for office. And that's just insane. First of all, you're not perfect. You're not ever going to be perfect. So just run, right? If that orange menace ain't told us nothing else, just
Right.
run.
Right.
You know what? This has been like one of the I love talking to you because you help me nerd out in my politics. And I really do appreciate your knowledge. Like when I talk to you, you're affirming because I maybe didn't know the technical term for a thing. And then me and you talking, I'm like, okay, my brain is okay. You are so knowledgeable and so helpful. Are you accepting any new candidates? Because I mean, it's not even July 4th yet. Are you still accepting new candidates? And if so, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes, really good question. Thank you for asking. Yes, I am. Probably 3 to 5 is more in terms of bandwidth that we can take on. Just being honest. And one thing I'll have to say is this is so needed because I'm going to be really honest with you. As we're growing with Indiana and our ecosystem and our infrastructure, the House only has so much bandwidth to help. They
Yeah.
support 7, 8, they defend a few, and then the rest of our candidates are left alone. That has to change.
Yeah.
We're asking candidates to step up, but we're not giving them the support to use to help them cross the finish line. And the other thing that I will put out there is if you're thinking for running for office, jump in. The deadline is fastly approaching and you can still file.
Yeah.
Reach out
What's the deadline? Do we know the deadline offhand? I can't
July
remember.
3rd, July 3rd.
July 3rd.
Right.
Okay.
For two reasons. One, we have the top of the ticket. We have some great folks at the top of the ticket. And a state will flip top of the ticket first before we will see some wins in our areas that we can win for the highly contested state houses. But my ask of folks out there is help the top of the ticket. Be that person that runs in an area that's never had someone run in a long time and get the Democratic message out there. Because two things will happen. You'll learn you won't win the first time, but let's redefine what winning is. Winning
Mm,
is helping that top of the ticket flip because you did some legwork. You were part of the team. We can help you with that. And secondly, you get better as a candidate and you start getting people more and more engaged. And then maybe second time or third time you do win. Winning doesn't happen the first time out for majority of people.
exactly. Look at Joe Hogsett. He
Right.
didn't win his first couple times out. I think he lost his first three races before
Right.
he won, right? You
Right.
know, one of the other, and this is gonna ruffle some feathers, and I really don't care because I'm Indiana's own. I can say what the hell I want. Um, One of the things that disturbs me as we're talking about helping the top of the ticket, there are a lot of incumbents that are in really safe seats that
Mm-hmm.
are, in my opinion, who are not doing nearly enough to help candidates who are in 50-50 seats or 60-40 seats or other places. You know, you don't have to comment on this because I know, once I say this, there's going to be some mad people at me, but I do not care. You can't sit back on your laurels and be like, I've been in the state house for 20 years and not actually go help somebody or go raise money for somebody. You know, on Act Blue, we have this ability to create tandem forums. So you
Yes.
can literally have your team because you're in a safe seat.
Mm-hmm.
You can have somebody on your team create a tandem form for a candidate that you align with, and you can literally just send out an email with your name because you're an incumbent and everybody
Yep.
knows who you are. Send them out to your people and say, hey, guys, I need your help. I know you're going to vote for me, but because you can't vote for this candidate needs some help. Am I out of bounds when I say such things?
Nope. Let me talk about a project I'm involved in that speaks just to that. Okay. So I'm going to preference this. I got to lay the groundwork. So when you look in Georgia, okay, we had Warnock and Ossoff won. Okay. Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat, it is a 30 plus Trump seat. Marcus Flowers ran against her. Everybody said, oh, good luck to that. But he was great on social media. He was great raising money and he raised close to $7 million. Why does that matter? It matters because he had a field operation going. He had mailers out there. He had advertisement. He spread the Democratic message. When the numbers were broken down, I worked with folks from Power of the Vote. When you broke down those numbers, that effort gave additional 15,000 votes to Warnock and Ossoff. If somebody
Wow.
left that seat uncontested, right, because it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, who wants to run against that type of contest, we would not have the Senate that we have today. Okay.
Wow.
So it's very important for people to say, what is my role in the win? Going back to what you said. So one of our donors was listening to one of our podcasts and they listened to the podcast with Civitech. We have a low voter turnout problem in Indiana. We also have a purging. We have a challenge with moving. We have a challenge with the GOP putting all this legislation in that makes it harder to vote.
Yeah.
Okay. So the donor came to me, and we have funded 7 candidates around the state with a data-driven voter registration project. Okay. For example, this is how successful this program. I know Heidi's numbers off the top of my head. Her district was included because it's a flippable seat.
Mm-hmm.
And so about 2,274 potential unregistered Democrats were identified. Okay. These are people that purged, moved, haven't voted in a little while, but need that nudge, say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. 30% of those people will actually register. Okay. Out of that 30%, 80% have a history of voting. That's the track record of this project. So that puts about 565 in the win bucket for these races that we're going to win in the margins. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I have access through Civitech to see all the data and what's going on across the state. In other areas, we could use a boost for the voter registration. Because remember, I was talking about top of the ticket. It matters what happens in all these districts. In the districts in the Indianapolis area, in the Gary area, where we have Democrats sitting and their seats they're uncontested, they have the highest number of unregistered potential Democrats in their districts. Let that sink in. Now, if you're a funder out there and you want to help a district to have some impact on the top of the ticket, if you're a supporter of Jennifer McCormick, if you're a supporter of Dr. McCrae, or any other of the candidates that are on the statewide ballot, that is a way to help the collective, because you'll help all of them. You will help get people registered to vote in a very data-driven way.
I love this conversation, guys. I've been talking to Mary Noone. Listen, she's with a campaign. She's a campaign strategist, and she's doing amazing work across the state. If you noticed, we touched on voter engagement and how it looks. We touched on the candidate's responsibility to voter engagement and fundraising and all the things. We talked about incumbents' responsibility to voter engagement. This is not a one-person job, okay? This is not a one organization job. We talked about the limitations of one organization being able to do everything. And she has mentioned, she said this word multiple times, collective. You can all sit around and be, oh my God, this is not gonna happen. It's gonna, oh, it's a woe is me. Or you can use that negative energy, turn it around and say, well, what can I do to make this thing happen? Okay,
Correct.
so maybe Terry Gooden ain't, well, who knows what's going to come out of that? We
Right.
discussed that, but say it's him, okay? Because I want people to get their brain fixed on the fact that it could be, right?
Yep.
So it's Terry Gooden. So he's not my favorite candidate, but yo, if they're in the office, they're going to be able to pick committee folks, and they're going to be able to make sure, FSSA is led by somebody that can count, right? They're going to
Correct.
make sure. Yeah, they're going to make sure the Department of art, what is it? Environmental Affairs has somebody in there that's going to say, okay, wait a minute. Let's look at this water situation holistically. Do we really want to give all the water to the business, or do we want to give it to the people who are going to be
Yep.
shopping at the business,
Right.
right? And so this is the point that we're trying to have today in this conversation is like, all is not lost in Indiana. We just have to be energized and engaged enough to get the person that wasn't engaged before, and it's going to take all of us. My job is to bring this to you. My job in this ecosystem is to talk to you
Mhm.
and be in your face and be annoying and be like, oh, that damn Dana Black get on my nerves. She always running her mouth. Whenever she see a mic, she happy. But that's my job, is to
Mhm.
bring this information to you. Mary's job is to help you strategize, is to help you get your things in focus, because get your project aligned, right?
Mhm.
Because your job is to be the candidate.
You
Your
got it.
job is to be the voter. So, guys, Mary, tell the people how they can reach out to you for your services, so they can hire you if they want, or if they, consulting advice. I don't know how you bill, so I'm not going to tell you to get nothing away free, but tell the people how they can get in touch with you.
They can reach me at Mary at mncampaignstrategy.com. That's where they can find me. I'm also on Twitter. My DM is open too. They can find me on Twitter at Mary Noone 11. And I'm active there. And I will say, to end this note, it does take a village. It is not just up to the Democratic Party. We need other states that are going across the finish line and winning is because there have other organizations running parallel and lifting up all the efforts. And the other thing that shocked me, and I'm going to leave you everybody with this final note. I was looking at the job description of Lieutenant Governor when Beckwith got, Micah Beckwith got, according to the job description, he would be in charge of Indiana's counter-terrorist activity. You got that.
Oh,
right?
oh.
So this election matters. There is an existential threat. He is a threat to our safety.
He is a terrorist. Oh, Jesus. He's been terrorizing people. He terrorized that library board.
It makes me giggle in the sense of it's a nervous energy because it's like to think that we have come to this point where that's who is on the ticket for Indiana. So it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a village. We have to engage our base. Once we get our base going and see the value that what's at stake, everybody else will come on board because they will believe you. They'll trust the messenger. They'll trust you as their friends, their neighbors, etc.
And come with positive energy and start with love. Right. So between Mary Noone and her strategy, me at Act Blue, what I offer from an Act Blue perspective, we don't charge anybody for that. But so reach out to me. Right. I will sit down and talk to you and I'll give you what I got. But it's up to you to use it. It's up to you to implement it in your strategy. And if you're thinking about running for office, next year is the perfect year. Right. We have no elections in Indiana next year. Next year is the perfect year if you are thinking about running for office. Mind you, if this election don't turn out the way we need it to, we might not have no more elections. I'm just saying. But next year, because we don't have elections, is the perfect year for every person who has contemplated running for office to get the tools, the training, the learning, the education that they need to become really good candidates and find mentors. Find people that you can talk to and ask questions of. If you're a voter out there and you're listening, you're like, you were talking about voter engagement. If you're a voter, many of us who call ourselves leaders in this political space, we make space to answer questions. I am on social media all the time. So if you have a question about a candidate or you have concerns about a candidate, and if I know, I will give it to you. If I don't, I will connect you because that's what I'm trying to do is to get you engaged and to believe in the citizen government, to believe in we are in control of how we live in America and in Indiana. So This was fantastic. Can we do this again sometime?
Let's do it again because there's a big election year coming.
I believe it. And you're amazing. And I love the work that you do and you inspire me every day. So keep doing that hard work. And guys, reach out to Mary Noone. If you need something, reach out to Indiana's own Dana Black. We'll have another regular scheduled Turn Left on Thursday. This Thursday is special because I'm going to have both of our AG candidates on, not together because we ain't looking for no fights, right? We're going to have one on to have her full half hour to talk, and then the second one, and you can then, before you make your vote at the convention, you will have heard directly from both the candidates in the same, I'm going to ask them the exact same questions. So guys, pay attention to Thursday's show. It's going to be great. Thank you again, Mary, and all the listeners out there that tune in to Turn Left. I really do appreciate you. I will holler at you next time. Peace. Turn Left is the property of Black Pearl IT Solutions. Executive producer, Indiana's own Dana Black. Music by www.bensound.com.